Today, I speak with Yoni Shimshoni, a former Wilson Center Fellow from Israel, a researcher at MIT, and part of the leadership team of Commanders for Israel's Security. 7 months into the Hamas attacks on Israel and the war in Gaza, there remains to be a lot of uncertainty on the days ahead. The challenges are monumental. 1,200 Israelis killed on October 7th, and over 600 IDF combatants killed in Gaza. On the Palestinian side, more than 35,000 Palestinians killed, the majority women and children. 60% of Gazan homes are destroyed, and the humanitarian crisis worsening every day in the Strip. Yoni, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
So, given the work that you are currently doing, and as well as the research that you've been conducting, where do you see Israeli society today? What is the view from Israel 7 months into the war in Gaza?
Okay. Well, in terms of Israeli society, I think it is still in a state of confusion and conflicted reactions and feelings about the future and how to move forward. There's still a very strong residual of rage, anger, humiliation, and related sort of emotional reactions to what happened on October 7th. There is what was a creeping, I would say now, a pretty more confident feeling of that the war is not in a direction that is going to bear fruit of some kind of victory or some kind of positive resolution. There is a pretty strong feeling among a majority. It's a small majority, but interestingly, it's a majority that the only way to resolve is to resolve the crisis, to open the aperture and think in terms of sort of a broader political diplomatic approach to bringing future security to the state of Israel. And we still have a lot of identity politics, so how people will actually vote if there is an election also remains kind of up in the air. So it's kind of a cocktail of sort of competing and conflicting reactions and feelings and sentiments as we go forward.
So I would like to zoom into some of these different reactions and sentiments that you talked about. So, with Prime Minister Netanyahu constantly declaring that the war will not be over until victory is achieved, he talked about a primary goal from the very beginning of basically the complete annihilation of Hamas. And it seems that has become more challenging than anticipated. What does victory mean, and how is this how are developments on the ground in Gaza shaping people's opinions and sentiments about perhaps turning towards a political solution, which so far, from what we've been hearing from Prime Minister Netanyahu, is not really the way he wants to go?
Yeah. So there is, as I said, a pretty strong feeling that the slogans of absolute victory and absolute annihilation, etc., are maybe they have some political purchase for within certain parts of the Israeli population. They don't have general purchase, and most Israelis, as far as we can tell, understand that they don't really mean anything in this context, and that trying to pursue an absolute victory may be possible, but only theoretically. In other words, if you're willing to annihilate the Gaza Strip, you can somehow get to it. If you're willing to resort to what the Americans resorted to in World War II in Japan, then maybe there's such a thing, but there isn't. That's not a practical or even a direction that most people, the vast majority, would want to go in. And that leaves you with seeking, I would say, more and more people realize that even the word victory is not the right concept. The right concept is some kind of success or achievement of goals and not victory. Victory has a zero-sum flavor to it, and a zero-sum victory over the kind of a Palestinian national movement is not something that's in the cards and should not even be pursued.
So when you say that there are more and more people, a slim majority, as you framed it, that are more likely to see a political solution or diplomacy as sort of the key tool, does that mean that there is hope for, or there are openings for some sort of reconciliation effort between Israelis and Palestinians? Is that a possibility, even in the midst of this war, with both societies in grief and in agony?
I think that, well, first of all, there is an opening, but I think the right path to go down is not at the moment. I think ultimately it is, but the right path to go down is not in search of reconciliation. I think both peoples probably are not ripe for some kind of reconciliation. The way to nest it and frame it and the path to go down is, let's say from the Israeli perspective, is the path of national security requirements. So if you ask Israelis, what do you think about, well, you know, we're not going to keep down, put the lid on Palestinian national aspirations, and let's go for a Palestinian state. If you try that, and people do try that, and we poll it with our partners in Israel, you get a very negative response. If you go a different direction, which is essentially, if I want to be efficient now, so essentially go down the Biden path, which is that we're not going to talk peace, love, and fuzzy relationships. So we're going to talk is Israeli national security. And Israeli national security, given the Biden approach, would be advanced by integrating Israel into a regional coalition that would include the more moderate Sunni states, and with European participation and probably with American leadership. And within that entire framework, there would be a separation from Palestinians and ultimately a Palestinian state. You get a positive reaction. So if you nest it and frame it in the world of concepts around national security, then you get a fairly positive response. It's not overwhelming, but it's positive enough so that there's some hooks to catch on to, to latch onto and pour.
So and that, I guess, is why you refer to this as an opening, because it does lead to eventually a Palestinian self-determination, a Palestinian state. But how do we move from here, and what do you anticipate the U.S. role to be? Given President Biden's approach, we've seen this relationship go through, different ups and downs, not only throughout this war in the last 7 months, but previously also with the judicial reforms and the tensions between both leaders. So how do you see the U.S. role moving forward, and how has the conduct of this war in Gaza, which has always been a point underlined by the Biden administration, how has this also impacted bilateral relations?
Well, bilateral relations are clearly also sort of internally conflicted. Tremendous support from the United States, along with leaning on Israel to alter some of its policies and behaviors. not just in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the West Bank as well. The only way that policy will change in Israel, and I mean, capital P policy, in other words, a real change in direction, will come with a change of government. In other words, this government is incapable, I think, even physically, is incapable of pursuing a different direction. It is, held hostage by the extreme right. And even if Netanyahu wanted to take this government in a different direction, he would find himself without a coalition within 5 minutes, probably. So what we are working for in Israel, not we as commanders, because we are not partisan, but we as we as individuals and the various movements on the center left are, if you ask what is the primary item on the agenda, it's to move to elections, to somehow get either a vote of no confidence or some other mechanism to bring the government to ask for the public's trust, and this government would not get it, and something else would have to emerge. That's likely the only way. So we are doing it from within, and probably enough American pressure will help from the outside, because the American pressure, probably not for this reason, but American pressure pushes the government to adopt policies that it itself cannot quite sustain politically. So American pressure kind of pushes the government over towards the cliff where it ultimately will fall
off. And following along the line of the key role that the United States plays, not only in this bilateral relationship and American pressure on Israel, but also with Israel's Arab neighbors, as well as the countries that only 3.5 years ago signed on to the Abraham Accords. Mm-hmm. How has this war impacted the relationship with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, and of course, more immediately with the immediate neighbors, Jordan and Israel, who were the first two countries to have signed a peace treaty with Israel?
So it depends on your point of view, whether the glass is half full or half empty. There's no question that this war, especially its societal aspects, put tremendous internal pressure from the streets in Jordan, the Emirates, Egypt, even Saudi Arabia. We think of it as a monarchy that doesn't have a street, but of course it does, and has pushed the regimes to cool relations with Israel, put them in a somewhat adversarial position vis-a-vis Israel. So that's the half empty. Those who think that Israeli policy is not so bad or want to see the half full glass say that, look, for all the tension and the pressure and for all the public outcry internationally and locally, etc., no one has cut diplomatic relations or.
And why do you think that's the case? Is it part of this long-term vision for the future? Is it more about the relationship with the US? I mean, why do you think that none of these countries have gone as far as cutting relations?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, who knows? But who really knows? But for Egypt and Jordan, for example, they rely strategically on the relationship in many aspects, and staying in a relationship is critical for being able to influence and have open conversation, argument, arm wrestling, etc. So I think for them it's important, until everything flows. If it becomes unsustainable, then they might find themselves doing that in reaction to their societal pressures. But at the moment, I think they see more benefit in the relationship than in cutting the relationship. Also, a feeling that cutting relations would not alter Israeli policy. In fact, it might actually make Israeli policy worse in their terms. I think that the Abraham Accord countries, especially the Gulf states or the Emirates, do see a future vision in which they want to participate and expect to participate. And it's as you suggested, it's a vision that is quarterbacked by the United States, and their relationship with the United States is very important. So I can imagine their internal discussion having a lot to do with what would that do to our relationship with the United States.
And one last question, perhaps. It's difficult for us analysts to project, of course, but there are patterns and trends that we can look at. As I mentioned in my intro, there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward. But what are some points of clarity that you can identify that will bring this war to an end and some sort of roadmap for a better future?
Okay, well, you say clarity or certainty. I guess those are two different things. I know nothing about the certainty of the situation, the logic of the situation, which is inescapable. And I think it is reflected in Israeli public opinion on the policies, not necessarily on the politics, because they're two different types. But if you look at Israeli public opinion on the policies, there is a very strong realization that Israel is not set up to deal with its national security challenges as it's set up to do today. That having this really powerful, world-class military doesn't solve it, doesn't resolve it. And in recent months, we've discovered that Israel has discovered that it has multiple fronts, interrelated, quite large, quite vast and extensive. And as I said, there's a realization that force alone won't cut it. So I think that's where the hope is that the politics will follow the understanding of policies. And I think that's a way to go. And that would put a whole chain of events in motion that, with high probability but not certainty, could lead to a good outcome.
Yoni Shimshoni, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, and we look forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.